Hello, my Juicy co-creators. Lilou here. I'm on the Juicy Living Tour today in Copenhagen at one of the universities in Copenhagen with Niels Harrit. Hello.
Hello. Great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You kind of look like Larry King, yeah?
Well, I wear suspenders in order not to drop my pants.
This is really good. I'm really grateful to have this conversation right now. Part of what I'm trying to do traveling around Europe is exposing some piece of truth, some elements that are not exposed by the big media. We're going to speak about 9/11, which you have digged into, and there is some truth or what you found as being true, and you have some proof of some that go along the conspiracy theories. For some, it's not theories; it's really happening. What got you into this? Because first, you're a retired physician, so you tell us about your background first before we get into before we dig.
We do. Okay. No, I'm a retired chemist, really. And I've been teaching chemistry and doing research at University of Copenhagen for over 40 years, roughly 45 years. And I was originally a chemist, but my field of expertise has shifted during this career. So here I've ended up in the physics department. And I've published more than 60 peer-reviewed papers in the best journals. And my take on 9/11 began 6 years ago, when accidentally my wife and I watched a DVD actually, which was sent to her anonymously because she has been a peace activist for as long, 40 years, all her life, I guess. But this DVD contained a presentation done by an American physicist called Stephen E. Jones from the from Brigham Young University in Utah. And during this presentation, he showed a clip of Building 7, which was a skyscraper standing next to the Twin Towers, World Trade Center. Many people, me included at that point, thought that World Trade Center were the Twin Towers. But World Trade Center was 7 buildings in total. Twin Towers number 1 and number 2. Number 3, the Marriott Hotel, was 22 stories. Number 4, number 5, and number 6 were relatively small buildings. But World Trade Center 7 was, according to Danish standards, a gigantic skyscraper, about a little less than half the height of the Twin Towers, 186 meters, 47 stories. And what I watched in this video was this building coming down, collapsing completely symmetrically for no apparent reason at all. And this made me shocked and angry for 2 reasons. First, I realized that this was World Trade Center and I had never seen it before. And so why haven't I seen it before? And the other thing was that I, as a natural scientist, has the knack of wanting to understand things. What's going on around us here? I'm trained to watching things with intuitively trying to understand. And in this case, I just couldn't understand why this building came down. So I had a problem. It took me several weeks to realize that this is a very, very important event. It's the most important event in my lifetime and yours and that of my grandchildren as well.
Why would you say it's that important event? What does it point at?
As I mentioned, why haven't we heard it and why did it come down? Because maybe you and your listeners have had a hard times with the physics and chemistry teachers, but we can all count to 3, okay? And there were 2 airliners, but there were 3 skyscrapers. And now everybody already there, we should get a sense that something doesn't fit. So and I'm talking now about the official explanation for 9/11, which I call the official I don't know if you say conspiracy or conspiracy theory. What is it?
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy, okay. Conspiracy theory, because maybe we should get that up.
Yes, because that's why I wanted to ask you is when you saw that and you say that it's the most important event for you of this lifetime or maybe for centuries, is it why? What does it point at our system, at our way that we live, at historically? What does that tell us about the world, such an event?
But there is a time before 9/11 and there's a time after 9/11. And the time after 9/11, the last 10, 12 years, is characterized by two states of mind, I would say, and one is the lie. Everybody's lying now, and everybody is scared. Everybody is afraid. And these are two conditions of our culture, which, in my opinion, is extremely dangerous and corrosive and fatal. Fatal is a proper word. Mm-hmm. The Western civilization, no less, I know I'm using big words here, but our Western civilization is at stake. It's really, really, really important. And since I've been dealing with 9/11, also from a scientific point of approach, view, and the more I get into it, the more I realize that the pivotal point here is the lie and what it has done to people. Because the moment you transmit a lie, the moment you tell a lie as a journalist, you are complicit in the crime. Mm-hmm. So everybody is more or less guilty. Which puts a lid on the free speech. There's no free speech in Denmark. There was 15 years ago, I thought. I don't think that anymore. Because there are certain things you're not allowed to talk about.
You mean the media is not doing their work of really informing, they're disinforming?
They're complicit in the crime. This is a media cover-up, obviously.
Coming from governments, coming from...
Now, well, then we go into speculation. I mean, actually, how the mechanism of media control, and this is not really my field, but I could point at how many news corporations are there in the United States? 5 or 6, which means they're owned by somebody. That means there's somebody who determines what to bring. Rupert Murdoch decides what they say on Fox News. So that's one thing, but I think that the journalists, you don't have to tell the journalists what to say. I mean, they can easily find out themselves. And if they make what the French would call a faux pas, they will find another person at their desk the next day.
How is that related, what you found and what we're going to talk about, to chemistry, to your field?
Well, my contribution is really, in all modesty, an academic footnote. But I'll return to it later on. I would rather first point out that we're talking about World Trade Center. We're talking about the collapse of the 3 buildings. And we are talking about what everybody could see that day, how they came down. And if I should make a very long story short, I can say that there is no connection physically, scientifically, between the impact of the 2 airliners and the collapse of the 3 skyscrapers. The 3 skyscrapers did not collapse due to the 2 airliners. They were taken down in controlled demolitions by using explosives and what the Americans call incendiaries, which is materials which destroy other materials by means of heat. An explosive works by means of force. I mean, you knock things apart, but incendiaries, in this case, can melt steel, can cut steel. And this I consider scientific mainstream. What I'm saying here is not controversial at all unless you refuse to accept the evidence. The evidence is crystal clear that the World Trade Center was taken down, controlled demolition. The only problem is that you're not allowed to say it. And that's a real problem. The press is a problem because the evidence is crystal clear. You cannot find a Danish constructional engineer or architect who can or who is ready to present and defend the official collapse scenarios in a setting with his peers. You can take an expert into it, an interview on television or radio, and they'll be lying. But to do the thing when your colleagues is there is completely different, because then you cannot lie, because everyone can look through it. A TV journalist would not understand elemental physics or chemistry, but you cannot do it in a scientific setting, a peer setting. So this you cannot find. You cannot. This has never happened, and that is indicative of that the official technical explanation, which came out of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a huge organization in the United States, in Washington, in D.C., and their reports, the report on the towers came out in 2005. Their report on the collapse of Building 7 came in 2008. And they are nothing but scientific fraud and a deliberate cover-up. I can go into details.
Yes, please, because there's so many things that are going around on the internet about all this that sometimes it's hard to find the truth, or it can be quite mind-boggling. So, what are the evidences for you? We saw some planes going to it with some people in those planes. Possibly, some people speak of. How do you say imagery? Some imagery were tricking our eyes. What is your understanding? Did really some planes crashed in, but it was not that collapsed the building? I mean, what's your view on the whole situation and that moment of explosion, of collapsing?
Well, first, what you're reflecting here is a situation which most people are suffering, that there is a lot of conflicting information out there. Yeah. And that is one way of suppressing the truth, that you're spamming the field with a lot of rubbish. And this is done deliberately. I mean, in Russia, they just go out and shoot the journalist. But here you spam the field with nonsense. So there's a lot of rubbish out there. And the thing you mentioned with the TV fakery and image pictures is one such thing. It is a story which is planted by whoever did not want the truth to come out to confuse things. Of course, there were two airliners hitting the two towers. Or let's say planes. You do not know what these planes were, where they came from, if they had ever been hijacked. There's absolutely no proof of that. There's no proof that these 19 young alleged hijackers ever boarded those planes. None. I have a friend, a researcher from Iceland, a scholar, who has spent a lot of time looking into actually the hard evidence for what we are talking about here. Did they ever board those planes? They were not on the original flight manifestos. They're not on the passengers list. There are no tickets. There are no boarding passes. There are no video evidence from them going through security. Whatever you've seen is obvious fakery, etc. And actually, a few years ago, he put out a reward of £10,000 sterling for anyone who can present forensic evidence that these hijackers eventually boarded those planes. And as he said with a smile the other day, my money is still in the bank. That's one thing. So, but 2 planes obviously hit the 2 towers. And but for one thing, the towers were designed to absorb the impact of an airliner of this size. Next, we were told that the jet fuel would melt the steel, which is totally rubbish. I mean, for one thing, everybody, when you saw the airliner coming in, there was a big fireball outside the building. That's where the jet fuel went. Bang. Say 95%. Of course, some of it went into the building. 5%, around that. And that burned out very fast. I have seen estimates between 3 and 8 minutes. So let's take an average, say, within 5 minutes, whatever went in there is gone. And jet fuel does not burn very vigorously. It's like kerosene. So not even NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which I abbreviate NIST, as everybody does around here, because it's a well-known institution. We call them NIST. They don't account on the jet fuel at all. And the completely outrageous thing about their report on the Twin Towers collapses, well, is that the report does not cover the collapse. So they came out with between 10,000 and 14,000 pages, including documentation and what we call supplementary material. But their timeline stops at the moment when the towers are due to collapse. You get that? There is no official technical account of the collapses of the Twin Towers. And it's all revealed. It is chapter 6 on the NIST report on the towers is called the probable collapse sequence. So you might, when you start reading chapter 6, you might think that now they are going to tell you how the towers collapsed, but they don't. They're all telling about what happened prior to the collapse. And everybody interested here, because you can read it actually. If you get to the NIST report, you go to page 82 of the summary, and you take out footnote number 13. It tells you that we know, we call this chapter the probable collapse sequence, and we know that we really do not cover the collapse, but we call it this for brevity. This is what we call it for brevity. I mean, this is what Winnie the Pooh would have said. We call it this for brevity. When I saw this footnote for the first time, I couldn't help from laughing out loud, because this was a message from my colleagues at NIST saying, hi folks, we know this is rubbish, but we got bills to pay, okay? That's about the towers. Building 7, they're presenting a collapse model, which is totally ridiculous when you hold it up against the fundamental laws of science. And when I'm saying fundamental laws of science, I'm talking about Sir Isaac Newton, who wrote a book in 1687, which is, we call it Principia. It has a long Italian title. We call it Principia. And it is an account of how things move in the physical world. It is considered the most important book in natural science. 1687 is when it was published. And there's the famous 3 laws, Newton's 3 laws of movement. And I would say that the collapse model presented by NIST is violating 2 of them. I mean, that's where we are. One thing is, as an example, It was a 47 stories skyscraper. When we leave, you can look at the building. We have the National Hospital outside the windows here. It's about 17 stories, and put two times. You can't say put triple that building. Put it upwards. It's this huge building for Danish standards. It's gigantic. 186 meters high, and it goes from complete rest into a movement which is free fall, and that is. When the 47th floor started to move, it fell as if there was absolutely nothing supporting it. Excuse me. At that moment, all supporting structure of the building was eliminated. And I'm talking about, I take my hairbrush here. I'm talking about the 47th floor of this building is dropping like this. It shows an acceleration which we call gravitational acceleration. That means the 47th floor is falling like this. There were 24 core columns in the building, supporting the building. There were 57 columns in the perimeter all the way around. And it had a footprint a little less than a soccer field. And it came down in free fall for more than 2 seconds. It falls exactly into its own footprint. It goes completely symmetrically down. Zip. Not tilting to the one side, tilting to the other side. It goes. There's nothing left when it's finished. What you see, the rubble pile is about 20 meters high, 2 stories high. Nothing's left except for the steel frame cut into appropriate pieces. This is a controlled demolition. There's no other. It's completely ridiculous to call it anything else.
Terrorism.
No,
A lot of people called it terrorism.
Yeah, but no.
It has a lot of consequences, all of this.
Of course it was terrorism, because it was a crime. People were killed. And terrorism, it means that you're killing innocent people. That's not the point. The point is that it was not hit by an airliner. It has nothing to do with Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden. Yeah. And it takes a long time to prepare for that.
So explosive were placed at each of those columns so that it cuts, everything was timed and prepared for a long time?
Yeah, definitely. Well, but now we go into details of how you take buildings down. Because all these columns I'm talking about, you do not have to cut them all at the same time in the last moment. Because such buildings are overdimensioned. That means you have an overcapacity of supporting the building. It's much stronger than it has to be just to keep it themselves up. So what you do is you cut the steel columns, but not all of them. So you cut as many so as the building is just remain standing. And the cutting is done with the incendiaries, which I told you about before. That means you have something which actually melts like a hot knife going through butter. This device cuts the steel beams. It's still standing. But the last moments, just when it has to come down, you have to use explosives because these are much faster than the incendiaries. And you have to time the collapse extremely accurately. The time sequence when the charges are fired has to be very accurate to take down this. I think it was close to 100,000 tons. Building 7. I'm not quite sure the building 7 how heavy it was. The towers were roughly 350,000 tons. But to take buildings like this and down into their own footprint, it's a piece of demolition engineering. It's a masterpiece. And the very last stages of firing these charges have been so exactly timed. in order to prevent it from tilting from one side to the other side. Of course, if you have an earthquake, buildings, they topple over. They do not.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, you can. Okay, so it's completely beyond, and that is the decisive moment. Once you have seen Building 7, there is no way back. You can try to fool yourself, which is the stupid thing you can do. You're not going to survive mentally if you do that.
So let's go for a moment into the why and who.
No, this is not my business. But what I'm telling you, maybe we should finish because your initial question. Where I came into the picture was this Professor Stephen E. Jones, who gave this presentation in 2006, which I have watched accidentally on a DVD. Later on, he started investigating the dust. We call it the dust. Maybe we should have called it powder, but everybody calls it dust. Because these 3 high-rises were completely pulverized, except for the steel. Everything else was converted into dust. So there were dust lying all over Manhattan. And believe me, it was not very healthy. That's another thing. Yeah. We can do a whole interview on that.
We saw the images, yeah.
Of
that dust everywhere.
Yeah.
And so that had a negative effect on the other people.
First responders they're extremely ill, by tens of thousands now, catching some very strange kinds of cancer. But that's a different thing. But already at that time there had been mapping of the dust, characterization of the dust in 2003, 2004, 2005 by other independent institutions. And based on these studies, Jones started to look into the dust for evidence of demolition and saw different things which on their own are unambiguous proofs that this incendiary is called thermite. And that is an old reaction, actually. This kind of incendiary, I told you an incendiary is a material which acts by means of heat. It destructs things by means of heat. And it's based on a chemical principle which is called the thermite reaction, which was discovered by a German chemist called Hans Goldschmidt in 1893. And it's a reaction between aluminum and, you may say, rust, which when it reacts, iron oxide, when it reacts, it produces elemental iron at a temperature of 2,500 degrees centigrade, which is about roughly 1,000 degrees higher than the melting point of steel, meaning that it could cut through steel. It's a very useful reaction. It's been used for welding ever since. You can weld rail tracks and train rails. And but it can also be used for destruction, of course, of armor. It has been used in torpedo and grenades for many, many, many years. And one of the footprints the thermite reaction leaves behind are some very tiny, we call them spherules or spheres, very tiny, completely round particles of iron. And they are found in abundance in the World Trade Center dust. This alone proves the thermite was used in the demolition. But was Jones eventually also discovered were some remnants of a material which apparently was unreacted thermite. That was remains of this incendiary which for some reason had not reacted, which is very natural. Whenever you have an explosion or an incendiary, it's never complete. When you're having a bomb attack or an explosion, the police moves in and they can always identify the material which was used as an explosive because there's always something left. Mm-hmm. And Jones actually identified some, we call them the red grade chips. Mm-hmm. And I, as a chemist at that time, I was in contact with another American scientist. His name is Kevin Ryan. And he suggested that we join forces in investigating these red-gray chips. And it eventually led to a scientific publication coming out on April 3rd in 2009. And what is in there, it's a very long article. But the basic conclusion is that these chips are still reactive. I mean, the key observation that we did was that they're less than a millimeter, most of them. But when you heat them up, then take off. They react. They are still reactive. And they form these iron spheres, which I told you about, which is an unambiguous proof that the thermite reaction has occurred. This is the most important observation. That is, we found unreactive thermitic material in the World Trade Center dust. This has been highly recognized, but also to some extent misunderstood. Because people call them explosives, which they might be. And now it gets a little complicated. Because the research, I told you that incendiary works by means of heat. Incendiaries has a lot of energy relative to its volume, much more than explosives. But incendiaries are slow. The chemical reaction is relatively slow. In an explosive, the chemical reaction is very fast. Boom! It goes like that. Incendiary is relatively slow. But when with the emergence of nanotechnology, you are moving into dimensions which are in between what we call bulk and molecular sizes. That is, you have particles which are just a little bigger than the molecules, meaning that you have the possibility of mixing the components on a scale which is much, much smaller than you can do if you start with aluminum and iron oxide. The consequence in terms of using all this energy in the thermite reaction is that you can now have the reaction running so fast that you can compete with explosives, and you can add, this is due to the way you're preparing these materials, you can add other stuffs which converts the material into an explosive. An explosive is something which generates a gas very fast. So by adding other chemicals, you can use the energy of the thermite reaction and make it do work, what you say, pressure work, and act as an explosive. So what I'm saying is that these, we call them energetic materials, now has the potential to be used as explosives. And we know they're being used as explosives, but we do not know exactly what kind of explosives were used in World Trade Center. We know that explosives were used, but we don't know their nature. We know that incendiaries were used, and they had by necessity to be thermitic materials. The explosives we don't know. And all we have found in the dust is remains of thermitic material, but we do not know where they fit into the demolition picture. And we should not speculate until we have the evidence. But many people has taken off on that and say, hey, they have found high-tech explosives in the dust, which is not quite accurate. And at one point, I mean, I must admit that in one TV interview, I have also used the word explosive. Because if you have 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you do not have time to explain the difference between an incendiary and an explosive. It very fast becomes complicated. And I don't request neither you nor your viewers to follow all this. The main point is that I don't know who got into this, but I know it was not Al-Qaeda. It was not Osama bin Laden.
No, the details are really important in this interview because there's viewers from all around the world at all different level of understanding, and I know some of them have been really digging, and some of them maybe have digged in places where you're saying are not exactly accurate. So your expertise here is very important and could add a piece of the puzzle, and who knows what else it can create. So it is essential. If there are some even technical aspect, please feel free to tell them in this interview because this is essential. Even if there's some things that you recognize as going around the internet that, especially particularly to this particular topic, we should know of, please let us know. This is the moment.
Okay. Audacious service. Yeah. Sure.
So if there is anything right now even that comes to your mind related to just what you said that would add another piece, please.
Well, one thing which I wish I had more time to publish now is maybe we should go back to the first responders. Because, and this is unpublished, this is news. Some of these first responders, there's been a project in 2010, I think, which was published from the Mount Sinai Hospital on Manhattan in New York, where they had looked at the lung tissue of some of these first responders who had fallen ill, and found in the lung tissue a material called carbon nanotubes, which are very tiny threads. I don't think if we go out in the corridor, I can show you some pictures of how they look like. And this has been found in the lungs of these first responders. And we have shown independently that what we call the nano-thermite, this material which we believe was involved in the demolitions, also produced nano-thermite upon combustion, which eventually may make a link from the material used for demolition purposes to the illnesses of the first responders. And this is very much on my mind these days, and I wish I had more time from other duties to get that published, but I hope to do this within this year. It's important. These are news at least, because but of course it's not the only was a health impact of the dust. What happened was that the dust was really nasty. I mean, if you have ever seen this under a microscope, you say, gosh, if people should ever breathe this. I mean, it's a plethora of fibers, glass fibers, asbestos, broken glass, mercury, lead, all nasty. Mercury comes from the light bulbs, the light tubes, you know. And also, pulverized concrete is basic. I mean basic in terms of acids and base. It's corrosive, downright corrosive.
It's like a Chernobyl.
It's burning the lungs. No, not Chernobyl. It's nothing to do with radioactivity. No.
It's like, this happening is like spreading all around, and it had consequences on health, had the same way that some nuclear in different ways, but with consequences on a large radius around the scene.
First of all, the people called the first responders. I mean, they were coming in by tens of thousands from all where to help. And they were working in this environment, breathing this dust with no protection at all. And during the first week, there came 11 messages, there's a word I'm missing here, from the Environmental Protection Agency of the Bush administration, telling people that the air was safe to breathe, because they wanted to open Wall Street as soon as possible. And it was a lie which has had consequences for tens of thousands of these first responders. They have just passed the bill after 10 years that these responders should be granted medical treatment. But now many of them have died. We're talking about tens of thousands. You should dig into this story. Yeah. It is so painful because these people, they came to help. I mean, and digging in the rubble and trying to find survivors, and they have been completely left behind. And they were even falsifying. And so this is another. Now we're talking about science. The scientists who eventually, this is 2002, I think, characterized the dust. They downright falsified the samples to improve the numbers. I'm talking about, well, maybe you've heard about pH, how you characterized acid-base properties of materials, but they simply falsified the samples to lower the pH value to get it below the threshold where it was not considered dangerous. But fact is that it was. They downright falsified their publication, the dust samples, to not so the authorities were not responsible for fraud.
What I'm hearing from something that you heard earlier too is that the science of whoever has done that, it seems like it's very advanced science that has been able to create that very evolved chemistry. Very for us non-scientific mind, it's quite scary to all of a sudden realize everything that can be done behind our back, and how in some laboratory somewhere something was being prepared to be able to realize this kind of genius or evolist happening. So it's scary then, because I guess it opens other doors to what else is really going on. I mean, have you ever digged in some other areas from that point on and discover some things related to the conspiracy theory? Because this brings, of course, the also the that some people talk about diminishing the population. We have the vaccines. There's chemtrails. There's so many other things.
It's real. This is real. And this is what I said in the beginning. The key point here is the lie. And and it's true that, and that is what really hurts us, because if everybody was telling the truth, you would not be able to get along with the other things you mentioned, the vaccines, the chemtrails, the whole thing with the, should we now say, Eisenhower warned us against the military-industrial complex in 1961. You know his departure speech. I'm sure you've seen it.
I even actually interviewed his great-granddaughter.
Okay.
Laura.
Yeah, that is
very much into talking of all this now.
Yeah, and he told the truth, but that time, what he saw, of course, coming from the services, he saw the military-industrial complex, but it has turned into a military-industrial, media, medical, academic complex now. It's really total control, I would say. So what we as ordinary average citizens is believing is reality is one big illusion. And the more you dig into it, the worse it gets. And maybe we should talk about this, because this is important. The enormity of this situation, and the lacking ability for us to grasp that. And that is the main obstacle. As you said, it's hard to believe, or I just don't believe it, or what people say, or you're crazy. And it is painful to realize what we are talking about here, because you have been and what you said, when some deceived, is that the proper English word? When somebody
betrayed.
Yeah, you've been betrayed by the people who should take care of you. And if we should go to the extreme of when you have the extreme situation of somebody being betrayed by somebody, it is like a molested child. That is about the worst thing which can possibly happen to a child. And how does a child react? By anger? No. By shame. By shame and depression. Empty eyes. And that's more or less what collectively is preventing us from realizing that we have been betrayed by the people who we put in power. I could use other words which should not be used in a television interview, but this is what has happened. And nobody wants to realize that because it's painful. It's painful. But I tell you one thing. The truth hurts. But the lies are killing us. So we have to stand up for it. Or be extinguished, terminated.
Exactly. It seems in all these interviews that I'm doing that we're talking of a new era of people opening up their eyes, of truth being discovered or found. There is anger. Some people speak of revolution. Some people talk about the end of a world, the beginning of a new one. What do you see here in Denmark, around the world, that could not save our species, but could make a change, a transition? Are we talking here of a revolution, of people rebelling, of people? What do you foresee?
Well, I don't know what I foresee, but we should all just act from where we are in time and space, and that is what we're doing. You don't find 9/11. 9/11 finds you wherever you are, and I think that's the beauty. This is a movement. It is not an organization. It's a movement. It's hundreds of thousands and millions of individuals, all acting from an inner urge, because they feel there's something wrong here, and I have to do something, and they take action from where they are in time and space. And if it's a kid in Cardiff, he goes down in the mainstream and passes out flyers or DVD. Or if it's a student on some university somewhere, he sets up a web page, or he do a radio program, or whatever. Everything very much is going on the internet, of course. But now they're doing their best to control that as well. They're taking down pages now. And but eventually they cannot stop the spread of information and the rise of consciousness. So, the other day, the first tanks were rolling out in St. Louis. You may not be aware of it when you're here in Europe, but there were tanks in the streets of St. Louis to familiarize the army and the population to the side of it. And I think whatever happens, it's going to be violent. Also because everything is connected, and nobody should believe that anything is accidental. Everything is connected. The financial crisis will eventually drive people out in the streets. If you go to Spain, you have unemployment between the 18 to 25 years old of 50%. And we're talking here about young men with a lot of testosterone and young women with a lot of energy and concern. And if they have no job, and Spain is the if you look at the numbers and where it's bound to go, there's only one way. Italy may be kept afloat by the mafia. Greece don't stand a ghost of a chance, but they're relatively small economies. Spain is, what's going to happen in Spain will be this summer will be very, very important, and everything is connected.
But knowing that there is this control and this that things are being planned, and that decreasing the population, the number of people on this planet, is apparently part of that plan. Could possibly us being angry at each other be also part of their plan?
Of course.
Violence is part of their plan, and is that really the way to go about such a thing? Isn't that what they want us to do, so that we deal with it amongst ourselves and then we extinct ourselves?
Of course. Where we're fighting each other. And every time you're setting up, and this is particularly done by the press, whenever you're setting up the conflict along national, religious, or ethnic fractures, borders, whenever you're rationalizing a conflict in terms of nationality, religion, or ethnicity, it's a digression. It means you're moving the what's called, you're moving the focus. Yeah, because the real conflict is between top and bottom. And the top, I promise you, they can cooperate across all borders, and they've done it here in Europe. You know, the kings and the queens, I mean, they're married across the borders, no problem. So and they can cooperate. It's between the top and the bottom. So they want the people to fight. This is, you know, the soccer European championship now, and what is it? Italy against Spain in the finale, the day after tomorrow, and everybody, the Spains and the Italians, will be up against each other and fight. That's what they want. And in particular, of course, in the streets, they want the poor policemen to fight with the poor unemployed. And the key question here, when it really gets down to it, will be if the American soldier is ready to shoot on the American citizen, or if he stays true to his oath. Because American military personnel, they do not swear on the government. They swear on the Constitution, which is a completely different thing if you take it literally. But that's where it is now. We are only a false flag operation event away from what you may call a fascist state. All the legislation now is in place. One of the last pieces was a law signed by President Obama, actually on New Year's Eve, which authorized the American military to arrest anyone who was suspected of terrorism activity, and keep them infinitively interned, hold them back, lock them up infinitely, without any trial, without any proof, without anything. So they could call you, hey, Lilou Macé, she's a terrorist. And the military, not the police, would come and pick you up, and nobody would ever see you again. It's there. So I'm not sure if it covers foreign citizens, but they're killing them with drones, so they don't bother that much. It's very, very, very serious right now. And that's why the consciousness of what I started to say, the fundamental thing is the lie. It corrodes everything. It corrodes the language. It corrupts the language, which means that what all you say culture, they say literature, music, films, they're all about nothing, basically, these days. And also, of course, journalism, when the language is corroded, journalism doesn't work either. And the fundamental thing, it's very intuitive that the lie is the core of the matter. And the biggest lie is the lie that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda was making a conspiracy and were responsible for 9/11. The official conspiracy theory is the greatest lie, is the mother of all lies since 9/11. So that's why it is important and so pivotal. I think of course, it's an obstacle to, you could say, peace and democracy, but it's also a window of opportunity. Because if you allow me to cite a person called John McIlvaine, who was the father of one of the victims on World Trade Center. His son was killed, Bobby, and but he said this time they went too far. This time they fucked up. So that's why 9/11 is a window of opportunity. It's a key to the whole thing. 9/11 is key, and Building 7 is the key to 9/11. Because once you have seen Building 7, there is no way back. You can't fool yourself anymore. You can try to, but you'll fail.
You've seen the movie The Matrix? Is it part of getting outside of this matrix?
Well, it comes up, actually neither my wife nor I, we have seen The Matrix. But everybody's talking about it. Everybody is saying what is in this film is coming true now. But we haven't seen it. But we can see the reality without having seen The Matrix. But when time permits, believe me, we're working on 9/11 around the clock. And so such a thing as sitting down and watching a movie is not, unfortunately, possible for us. But we are looking to get a copy of it, and eventually we'll get time to see it. Yeah, everybody says that it is all in that movie. Maybe
realizing and waking up to the reality. And a lot of conversations that I have with many people are about reality. What is reality in the end? How do we create reality? What is really going on? And that's quite something. I think that's part of the awakening and the raise of consciousness. Not that I am for more wars or anger, not at all, but I think once a person is more educated towards a topic, then there is... it doesn't have to end in a huge fight either. I mean, there is... I don't know how to put this because I know there's...
Are you saying that the more educated people are, the more concerned they are?
No, there's just when we reach, I think, a level of understanding, we don't have to go and be angry and kill at each other, but there is an evolution that is needed as human beings now, and that it's an awareness. It's like knowing, and to act for the good, and doing it in ways where we create, like I'm doing, our own jobs, and because we don't fit anymore in the matrix, in the system that has been created for us, and we no longer live by the rules of the government, or that's what I mean by it's more of raising our awareness rather than just the knowledge for knowledge, for the good of all. I mean, it's time to really even... We can go into a full other hour and many hours of the nature and the environment and all of that, and we can see that all of this game has an end to it, and it's time to wake up and create a new one.
It's basically the same thing. I mean, and there's nothing wrong. If you're working to improve, if you're concerned about the environment, and you're fighting for that, good. If you're against landmines and you're fighting against landmine, good. If you're concerned about freedom of speech and human rights, good. Or citizens' right. If you're concerned about the economy, if you're concerned about unemployment, if you're concerned about children welfare or welfare for the elderly, it is all basically the same fight. It's different fronts, but it's basically the same fight. And it
comes down to, what does it come down to? What is that fight? How would you describe it?
Well, I would say what you say. You use the word reality, And the front where I'm working, we call it the truth. And it is a much bigger word than you may anticipate. And also in science, I mean, we can look at the same subject and I say it's black and you say it's red. I mean, and that is where you are somewhere. Particularly if you know the implications. I've been sitting in this very room with a professor of physics. This is the Niels Bohr Institute. It's highly... Professor of Physics. We were watching Building 7 going down. And I said, his name, let's call him John. John, look at this. No, he says. Look at this building. It's coming down in free fall. No, he said. Now, please, the data. Please look at the data. This building is going down in free fall. No, he said. Data means nothing. I mean, this is a professor of physics who's been trained at looking at reality all his life. He completely refuses to look at reality because he knows the implications doesn't fit his preconceived concept of how the world should be put together. So it's just seeing things as they are is a huge accomplishment. And so what you call reality, I call the truth, but it's basically the same obstacle. And we should beware how propaganda is working. It's so sophisticated. It's so elaborated. It's so, I mean, not what they're showing us, but what they are not showing us, and how we're supposed to spend the time watching X Factor or something. It's completely ridiculous things. And you know now that these days, this interview, what is today? It is June 30th, 2012. And a couple of days ago, they just did a false flag operation down in Syria. I mean, they flew probably an unmanned fighter jet into Syrian territory, which the Syrians had to shoot down. So now the Turks have an excuse for opening a war against Syria. This is serious. Excuse me, this is deep shit. There's a war going on down there. And what do you see on Danish television? There's been heavy rain in Copenhagen today. And the trains are delayed.
This is serious.
You know what I mean? So this is the way it works. Yes. Just sit back, don't move. And this is the message which comes out of television. And there's a lot of reasons to move.
So your last message to close this beautiful conversation. I don't know if I should call the word beautiful, but at least eye-opening conversation. Thank you for having the courage to expose what you see and what you have researched and all of that. I can measure the implication it has. So, in the name of everybody watching, thank you for having the courage to do that. What would you say as a final closing word to everybody, so that we're leaving a place of being inspired, empowered?
Well, I feel tempted. I know I've said this in other interviews as well, but it sums up my personal situation and probably many of your viewers as well. I have 6 grandchildren, and in 10 years' time, they will be old enough to ask me, "Grandfather, which side were you on?" And I'm going to answer them, "I was on your side." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you, my beautiful co-creators all around the world. Please share this type of videos. We'll subtitle it in many languages as possible. If you wish to volunteer to subtitle this, please contact me directly at liloumacé.com, and I'll be happy to get your information, because I think this is really great. That's the beauty of the internet, is that we could spread this really fast. Thank you to everybody helping out, and we send you much, much love here from Copenhagen. Danish, the Danish are shaking it. Bye.
we should get a sense that something doesn't fit.
So
And I'm talking now about the official account explanation for 9/11, which I call the official I don't know if you say conspiracy or conspiracy theory. What is it?
conspiracy.
Conspiracy, okay. Conspiracy theory, because maybe we should get that up.
Yes, because that's why I wanted to ask you is when you saw that and you say that it's the most important event for you of this lifetime or maybe for centuries, is it why? What does it point at our system, at our way that we live, at historically? What does that tell us about the world? Such an event.
Well, there is a time before 9/11 and there's a time after 9/11. And the time after 9/11, the last 10, 12 years, is characterized by two states of mind, I would say, and one is the lie. Everybody is lying now, and everybody is scared. Everybody is afraid. And these are two conditions of our culture, which, in my opinion, is extremely dangerous and corrosive and fatal. Fatal is a proper word. Mm-hmm. The Western civilization, no less, I know I'm using big words here, but our Western civilization is at stake. It's really, really, really important. And since I've been
Hello, my Juicy co-creators. Lilou here. I'm on the Juicy Living Tour today in Copenhagen at one of the universities in Copenhagen with Niels Harrit. Hello.
Hello. Great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You kind of look like Larry King, yeah?
Well, I wear suspenders in order not to drop my pants.
This is really good. I'm really grateful to have this conversation right now. Part of what I'm trying to do traveling around Europe is exposing some piece of truth, some elements that are not exposed by the big media. We're going to speak about 9/11, which you have digged into, and there is some truth or what you found as being true, and you have some proof of some that go along the conspiracy theories. For some, it's not theories; it's really happening. What got you into this? Because first, you're a retired physician, so you tell us about your background first before we get into before we dig.
We do, okay. No, I'm a retired chemist, really, and I've been teaching chemistry and doing research at University of Copenhagen, dealing with 9/11 also from a scientific point of approach, view. And the more I get into it, the more I realize that the pivotal point here is the lie and what it has done to people. Because the moment you transmit a lie, the moment you tell a lie as a journalist, you are complicit in the crime. Mm-hmm. So everybody is more or less guilty, which puts a lid on the free speech. There's no free speech in Denmark. There was 15 years ago, I thought. I don't think that anymore, because there are certain things you're not allowed to talk about.
You mean the media is not doing their work of really informing, they're disinforming?
They're complicit in the crime. This is a media cover-up, obviously.
Coming from governments, coming from...
Then we go into speculation. I mean, actually, how the mechanism of media control. And this is not really my field. But I could point at how many news corporations are there in the United States? 5 or 6? Which means they're owned by somebody. That means that there's somebody who determines what to bring. Rupert Murdoch decides what they say on Fox News. So that's one thing, but I think that the journalists, you don't have to tell the journalists what to say. For over 40 years, roughly 45 years, and I was originally a chemist, but my field of expertise has shifted during this career. So here I've ended up in the physics department, and I've published more than 60 peer-reviewed papers in the best journals. And my take on 9/11 began 6 years ago, when accidentally my wife and I watched a video, a DVD actually, which was sent to her anonymously because she has been a peace activist for as long, 40 years, all her life, I guess. But this DVD contained a presentation done by an American physicist called Stephen E. Jones from the from Brigham Young University in Utah. And during this presentation, he showed a clip of Building 7, which was a skyscraper standing next to the Twin Towers, World Trade Center. Many people, me included at that point, thought that World Trade Center were the Twin Towers. But World Trade Center was 7 buildings in total. Twin Towers number 1 and number 2. Number 3, the Marriott Hotel, was 22 stories. Number 4, number 5, and number 6 were relatively small buildings. But World Trade Center 7 was, according to Danish standards, a gigantic skyscraper, about a little less than half the height of the Twin Towers, 186 meters, 47 stories. And this, what I watched in this video, was this building coming down, collapsing completely symmetrically for no apparent reason at all. And this made me shocked and angry for 2 reasons. First, I realized that this was World Trade Center and I had never seen it before. And so why haven't I seen it before? And the other thing was that I, as a natural scientist, has the knack of wanting to understand things. What's going on around us here? I'm trained to watching things with intuitively trying to understand. And in this case, I just couldn't understand why this building came down. So I had a problem. It took me several weeks to realize that this is a very, very important event. It's the most important event in my lifetime and yours and that of my grandchildren as well.
Why would you say it's that important event? What does it point at? As
I mentioned, why haven't we heard it and why did it come down? Because maybe you and your listeners have had hard times with the physics and chemistry teachers, but we can all count to 3, okay? And there were 2 airliners, but there were 3 skyscrapers. And everybody already there